Good day everyone, I am Maynard Lapus and I'm going to discuss to you about Edukto 1 Month Facilitating Learning, topic number 5, Cognitive Theories. Topic number 5, Cognitive Theories, Learning Outcomes. Number 1, explain and differentiate the theories that falls under cognitive perspective. Number 2, determine how to apply these basic theories into the learning process. Number 3, demonstrate appreciation of the usefulness of cognitive theories in the teaching learning process. Advanced Organizer, topic number 5, cognitive theories. Here we will discuss the 5 theories of cognitive theories. Number 1 is Gestalt theory. Number 2 is information processing theory. Number 3 is Gagne's condition of learning theory. Number 4 is Ausubel's subsumption theory. And last is Brunner's constructivist theory. What is cognitive theory? Cognitive theory looks at the way people think. Mental processes are an important part in understanding how we learn. The cognitive theory understands that learners can be influenced by both internal and external elements. The first cognitive theory is the Gestalt theory. Gestalt theory was the initial cognitive response to behaviorism. It emphasized the importance of sensory wholes and the dynamic natures of visual perception. The term, the term Gestalt means form or configuration. Psychologists Max Wertheimer, Wolfgang Kohler, and Kurt Kopka studied perception and concluded that perceivers or learners are not passive but rather active. They suggested that learners do not just collect information as is, but they actively process and restructure data in order to understand it. This is perceptual process. Certain factors impact on this perceptual process. Factors like past experience, needs, attitudes, and one present situation can affect their perception. Gestalt psychology adheres to the idea of learning taking place by discovery or insight. The idea insight of learning was first developed by Wolfgang Kohler, in which he described experiments with apes, where the apes could use boxes and sticks as tools to solve problems. Gestalt principles or laws. Number one law is the law of proximity. Elements that are closer together will be perceived as coherent objects. Number two is the law of similarity. Elements that look similar will be perceived as part of the same form. Number three is law of closure. We tend to fill the gaps or close figures we perceive. Number four, law of good continuation. Individuals have the tendency to continue contours whenever the elements of the pattern establish an implied direction. Number 5. Law of good pregnance. The stimulus will be organized into as good a figure as possible. And number 6. Law of figure or ground. We tend to pay attention and perceive things in the foreground first. A stimulus will be perceived as a separate. The second theory is the information processing theory. It is a cognitive theoretical framework that focuses on how knowledge enters and is stored and is retrieved from our memory. Relating how the mind and the computer work is a powerful analogy. The terms used in the information processing theory or IPT extends this analogy. Those who program and design computers aim to make computers solve problems through processes similar to that of the human mind. According to information processing theory, there are 5 types of knowledge that the learner may receive. These are general versus specific, declarative, procedural, episodic, and conditional. The three primary stages in information processing theory are: number one, encoding. Information is sensed, perceived, and attended to. Number two is storage. The information is stored for either a brief or extended period of time, depending upon the processes following encoding. Number three, retrieval. The information is brought back at the appropriated time and reactivated for use on a current task, the true measure of effective memory. Here we have the information processing model. Information is received through the senses and goes to the sensory memory for a very brief amount of time. If not found relevant, information may decay. It goes to the STM, and if given STM or short-term memory, and if given attention and is perceived and found to be relevant, it is sent to the LTM or long-term memory. If not properly encoded, forgetting occurs. Different cognitive processes applied to the information will then determine if information can be retrieved when needed later. The number three theory of cognitive theory is the Gagne's conditions of learning. In this theory, Gagne specified several different types or levels of learning. He stresses that different internal and external conditions are needed for each type of learning. Thus, his theory is called conditions of learning. Gagne's principles. Number one, different instructions is required for different learning outcomes. Gagne's theory asserts that there are several different types of levels of learning. Furthermore, the theory implies that each different type of learning calls for different types of instructions. Number two, learning hierarchies define what intellectual skills are to be learned. In a sequence of instruction, Gagne suggests that learning tasks for intellectual skills can be organized in a hierarchy according to complexity: stimulus recognition, response generation, procedure following, use of terminology, discriminations, concept formation, rule application, and problem solving. Number three, events of learning operate on the learner in ways that constitute the conditions of learning. These events should satisfy or provide the necessary conditions for learning and serve as the basis for designing instruction and selecting appropriate media. The fourth theory of cognitive theory is the Ausubel's subsumption theory. The main theme of this theory is that knowledge is hierarchically organized, that new information is meaningful to the extent that it can be related or attached or anchored to what is already known. Focus of Ausubel's theory. Number one, the most important factor influencing learning is the quality, clarity, and organizations of the learner's present knowledge. This present knowledge consists of facts, concepts, propositions, theories, and raw perceptual data that the learner has available to him or her at any point in time. This comprises his or her cognitive structure. Number two, meaningful learning takes place when an idea to be learned is related in some sensible ways to ideas that the learner already processes. Ausubel believed that before new material can be presented effectively, the student's cognitive structure should be strengthened. Advanced Organizer. The Advanced Organizer is a major instructional tool proposed by Ausubel. The Advanced Organizer gives you two benefits. Number one, you will find it easier to connect new information with what you already know about the topic. And number two, you can easily see how the concepts in the certain topics are related to each other. The fifth theory is the Brunner's constructivist theory by Jerome Brunner. A major theme of this theory is that learning is an active process in which learners construct new ideas or concepts based upon their current or past knowledge. Brunner's main concepts of representation. Number one, enactive representation. At the earliest age, children learn about the world through actions on physical objects and the outcomes of these actions. Number two, iconic representation. This second stage is when learning can be obtained through using models and features. Number three, symbolic representation. In this third stage, the learner has developed the ability to think in abstract terms. This uses symbol system to encode knowledge. Brunner's two important concepts in the development of representation. Number one, the spiral curriculum. In a spiral curriculum, teachers must revisit the curriculum by teaching the same content in different ways depending on students' development levels. This is why certain topics are initially presented in grade school in a manner appropriated for grade schoolers, and then the same is tackled in high school, but on a much deeper level. Number two, discovery learning. Discovery learning refers to obtaining knowledge for oneself. The teacher plans and arranges activities in such a way that the students search, manipulate, explore, and investigate. Brunner states that the theory of instruction should address four major aspects. Number one, predisposition to learn. He introduced the ideas of readiness for learning. Brunner believed that any subject could be taught at any stage of development in a way that fits the child's cognitive abilities. Number two, structure of knowledge. This refers to the ways in which body of knowledge can be structured so that it can be most readily grasped by the learner. Number three, effective sequencing. No one, sequ- no one sequencing will fit every learner, but in general, the lesson can be presented in increasingly difficulty. Number four, reinforcement. Rewards and punishments should be selected and paced appropriately. This is the end of our discussion. Thank you, and may the Almighty God bless us all.